Hi, folks. My name is Dan Krauss. I'm 193 years old. I've been retired since 1878, and I've been living in Dauphin County, where I grow apples and I make apple cider. I've had a lot of time on my hands since my retirement. With my age, I've gotten pretty lost in weird corners of the internet, if you can imagine. But it's a good kind of lost. I've actually gotten into reading these scientific studies here, these studies. These things are pretty tough to read, but with the amount of time I have to really dig into them, I figure I can summarize these in a few minutes in some plain English for you. Now, I'm an old guy and I talk pretty slow, so you'll have to bear with me. But I've seen a lot in my day, and there's a lot to share. So why don't we get started here? This week's topic is wildfires, and particularly how wildfires here lead to mudflows that can cause problems to just regular old folks like you and me. This study is called The Grain Size of Sediments Delivered to Debris Flow Channels Before and After Wildfire. Now, in plain English, they're just looking at how big the rocks are in the rivers before and after a wildfire here that burned in Southern California. In one sentence, I'd say rocks, well, they move downhill unless there's a bush, but especially if there's a cliff. And this promotes mudflows after fires. Well, okay, so what? Well, these folks are looking at an area near Los Angeles, California, where there's a pretty thin barrier between the mountains and about 20 million people that are living below. The barrier is called flood control, which is actually my second favorite topic of interest. Of course, after making apple cider. Now, flood control in Los Angeles is a series of basins and concrete channels that keep the water and rocks and wood away from people's houses. The system was formally developed after a bad storm in 1938 that flooded the city. That's me in the car there, actually. I was holidaying in the area, looking at the Mickey Mouse over there. These structures have been pretty successful since, actually, but they're not really designed to handle the large amounts of rocks and sticks that come after these wildfires. So what these folks did is they went up high into the mountains where these rocks come from, and they flew a little whatcha-hoozer up there to take some pictures. And they took pictures before and after the wildfire burned this place. They were lucky enough to have a set of pictures before the wildfire, and they could see what was going on up there right after the fire, but before the storms came. Now, this period after the fire is when scientists can make forecasts of what the heck might come out of these mountains when it rains. So you might be familiar with a weather forecast, but there are also geology forecasts too. They're just much harder to understand. Anyway, what they found up there was a lot of rocks. They found about 100 years worth of rocks, to be honest. I think that's about a half a lifetime of rocks. And now a 1-foot pile of rocks behind a bush might not look like a whole lot, but over a mountain range, these things can add up. And they also found up there some big old sticks. And these big sticks, the bottom of these sticks had burned away, and these fellas are pretty much ready to topple over and go in the next flood too. In some places, the whole stick burned away, and you actually have just a hole, so you have a stick hole that was left behind. Now, the sticks and the smaller rocks, they mix with these big rocks that are already sitting in the bottom of the channels. So if you've ever been up high on top of a mountain and thrown rocks down the side of a slope, you might notice that if the biggest rocks that you throw, they don't really care much for the bushes, and they just blast their way on down to the bottom of the hill. So what these folks show with their pictures is that those big rocks had already been sitting around in the bottom of the channels before the fire, and they've been building up there for hundreds of years. So this mixture then of small rocks that have been released after the fire, and then those big old rocks that have been sitting around for a long time, makes for a pretty destructive mixture. Now, the first storm to hit this area was Tropical Storm K, which created post-fire mudflows like the one you're looking at here. This is clearly bad. This flow contains all those pebbles from the hillsides and the large boulders and logs too. And each one of these surges here builds on top of itself, and the flow grows pretty much with a mind of its own, overtopping the channel and getting into the houses next to it. The next storm to hit this area was Tropical Storm Hillary a year later. This mud flow comes from the burned area again, and it carries large logs and boulders underneath this small culvert, which is working overtime to pass things through. The second flow here is actually from an area that was not burned by the fire, but on the other side of the ridge. You can see it's much chunkier, and it doesn't contain the small pebbles that come from the fire-affected areas. The post-fire recovery of the landscape in the surrounding communities is usually a long and turbulent period. So these mountain front communities of Forest Falls and Oak Glen suffered a few $1 million of damages, and there was actually a fatality as well. And after apple cider and flood control, I'd say my third favorite topic of interest is insurance claims, which can be complicated in these cases. So these flows themselves sometimes are classified as floods or earth movements. So you want to read your insurance policy closely before these events happen. Well, in any case, the aid and recovery usually isn't straightforward, and there's some charities linked in the description below where you can provide support for the folks that were sadly affected by these events. These environments and the people who live near them, they will continue to evolve in new and potentially interesting directions. And I guess I could just hope for another good, healthy 193 years to see where we all end up here. So that's all I have for now. I'm actually pretty tuckered out, thinking about maybe getting myself a snack here, maybe a pudding cup or something like that. I just bought a new pack of pudding cups, but one of them's a banana flavored. They always throw that in there. And you see, that's the only one left, actually. I ate all the others, and then you end up with just the banana one left. And people, they call me Dan the Man with time on his hands, but they definitely don't call me Dan the Man with banana in his plans. Don't like the banana here. So we got a little bit of a quandary here with the snack situation, but that's something for me to kind of figure out on my own. If there's anything on your mind or a study that you would like me to read about, feel free to say hi in the comments or drop me a line or a question. Anyways, it's been nice to have you here, and so long from Dauphin County. I'll catch you next time.